All right, but what about movie viewers' eye movements? Okay, and that's a topic that we don't know because no previous research has asked this question. Okay? So part of the reason why no previous research has asked this question is because of what I would call the compartmentalization. That's a long word, but it means the separation into different groups of research on film perception and film comprehension. Okay? So there's no integrative theory that can explain both film perception and film comprehension. Okay? And that's because there are separate areas of research that have been done, and the people in these areas of research tend not to talk to each other very much. Okay? And so these three areas of research are scene perception. So in scene perception, people study perception of scenes, so like a photograph or video of this room right now. We could show that to somebody and we could flash it and ask them, what is it? And they could say, it's a classroom, and identify that very quickly. That would be scene perception. Or show them this photograph of this room and measure their eye movements and see what they pay attention to, what they look at, or what they remember. Okay? These are all things in scene perception. Okay? Then there's another area called event perception. So if I show somebody a video of this lecture, and then you see different parts of the lecture. For example, when Dr. Psyche was doing my introduction, and then when I start talking, these are different parts, and so we would segment it, okay? But those parts are in our mind. It's not in the reality, but we perceive we perceive reality as being in chunks. And that affects our memory. So that's event perception research. And then lastly, discourse comprehension or text comprehension or reading comprehension. Okay? So people have done a lot of research on reading comprehension, and a very small number of people have also taken those ideas and applied them to film. One of the only people to do that is my friend Joe Magliano, who's working with me on this project, who I mentioned. Okay? But people doing research in these three areas hardly ever talk together. Some of the only people doing that are me, because I'm in scene perception talking with Joe Magliano, who does discourse comprehension and event perception research. So there's no theory that puts all this together. So I have come up with the theory, and I've been working on it with Joe Magliano and Tim Smith and Adam Larson and now John Hudson. And it's called the Scene Perception and Event Comprehension Theory, or SPECT, SPECT. Okay? And there's a lot of stuff going on in this. It looks very complicated, but actually if you look at all the parts and you take it apart, it's actually not so complicated, considering that it's trying to explain a lot of things, perception and comprehension. But I'm going to just go over it very briefly. So we start with the stimulus. So in this case, it's going to be a movie. Okay? And then we have what we call the front end. And these are the front end are processes, mental processes that happen during single eye fixations. So that's why we have this little eye icon here. Okay? These are single eye fixations. And then we have what we call the back end, and those are processes that are going on in memory. Okay? In memory, not in perception, but in memory. And those, we have short-term memory, or working memory, as we call it, and we also have long-term memory. Okay? So in my talk today, I'm going to talk about the front end, and specifically I'm going to be talking about attentional selection. So on every eye fixation, the brain is taking in information, that's what we call information extraction, and the brain decides where the eyes will go next. Before the eyes move, the brain decides where to go. And that's what we call attentional selection And that's why we have an arrow from one eye to the next, because in between this fixation and then when I decide to make the next fixation, my brain decides, and then my eyes go there. Okay? And I'm going to talk about the back end, and specifically I'm going to be talking about what we call the current event model. The current event model, a simple way of saying that is your understanding of what you are seeing now. Like all of you have a current event model for this event, the lecture I'm giving, and you have an idea, an understanding of this lecture. Okay, that's your current event model for this lecture. Okay, and we say that there's three main processes. Laying the foundation for the current event model, that is, at the very beginning of a new event, you have to understand, what is this event? And once you have a rough idea, a very general rough idea of what the event is, for example, this is a lecture, okay? You have that idea, you have laid the foundation. And then the next step is mapping incoming information. So after you have a rough idea of the event, as new information comes in through your eyes during the fixations, you add that new information to the event model. We call that mapping incoming information. And then at the end of the event, you stop processing that event, you put it in long-term memory for later, and then you start a brand new event. And so you start the whole process over again, and that's called shifting. Okay? So I'm mostly going to be talking about mapping incoming information. In the middle of an event, as you take in new information and add it to your understanding of what's going on now. Okay? And what my question is does this mapping of incoming information in the current event model affect attentional selection? And so that's a very technical way of asking the question, how does understanding of a movie affect perception of the movie or eye movements in the movie? Okay? So I'm going to be talking about these questions that I just told you that have come from SPECT and that we have tested these questions already. And I'm going to give you the results. Okay? So we're asking about, does the back end in memory and understanding affect the front end, the attention and eye movements? So does constructing the current event model, our understanding, influence attentional selection, our eye movements in film?